1 year later, the mainstream media still doesn't see the January 6th attack as a racial thing. Um, January 6th is literally a white supremacist assault on democracy, but has anyone in the media come out and said that, no, they fucking haven't. Um, Public opinion polls and other research have repeatedly shown that white racist attitudes, whether presented as old-fashioned racism or in less direct fashion, as racial resentment and racial hostility, are strongly associated with support for Donald Trump and his Republican fascist movement. It is certainly true that feelings of economic insecurity, inequality, and social alienation among the white working class are central to understanding the rise of American neo-fascism, but throughout American history, those forces have primarily manifested through white racial in its various forms. As social theorist Stuart Hall described this dynamic, race is the model modality or modality or whatever, a modality in which classes lived. Webb Duval had explained it this way in a memorable passage from Black Reconstruction. Um, Slavery bred in the poor white a dislike of Negro toil of all sorts. He never regarded himself as a laborer, or as any part of any labor movement. If he had any ambition at all, it was to become a planter and to own Negroes. And to these Negroes, he transformed all the dislike and hatred in which he had for the whole slave system. The result was that the system was held stable and intact by the poor white. President Lyndon Johnson offered a famous observation in a similar vein. If you convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice your pick in his pocket. But hell, he'll give him something to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. Now, in this type of sense, the age of Trump is the latest iteration of a much older politics of white rage and white supremacy, whose origins extended well back before the founding. Now, last January, Trump's agents and sycophants attempted to nullify the results of the 2020 presidential election. Their plot consisted of a multifaceted nationwide plan to disqualify Joe Biden's rightful votes, and some participants literally suggested deploying the military after declaring a national state of emergency to cement Trump's control over the country. The evidence shows that the Capitol attack of January 6th was an integral component of Trump's coup attempt that was intended to delay the certification of the electoral votes and prevent the final and formal election of President Biden as the rightful president. In none of these events was race in any way a peripheral or an irrelevant issue. It is simply it's simply factual to describe January 6th as a white supremacist attack on multiracial democracy. But if one were to rely on the consensus of the America mainstream news media on the 1 year anniversary, one might come out and say it with the belief that racism and white supremacy played little or no role in the events of that day. Very few of the personal essays and reflections from journalists and others who were at the Capitol or basically nearby on January 6th, they explicitly mentioned that Trump's attack force was almost entirely all white. Now instead, all those accounts depicted a raceless and colorless horde of angry political hooligans attempting to overthrow American democracy. Now the other writing about the events of January 6th focused more impersonally on the role of authoritarianism and populism. Again, the specific racial marker was missing. It was not described as white populism or white authoritarianism, or better yet, white fascism, white terrorism, or white violence. Likewise, Trump's attack force and coup plotters were involved in an insurrection, but not a white insurrection. They were enraged about the 2020 election and its results, but not driven by the white rage. Now, not centering the role of race in the events of January 6th, but other realities are obscured as well. Trump's attempted coup and the ongoing attacks on American democracy are a function of toxic white masculinity, fake Christians, collective narcissism, and other pathologies, including a profound societal impulse towards violence, self-destruction, and death. Many journalists may object to this criticism by responding that race and racism are not their meat, and they lack expertise in that area. Now, my response to this would be that they are neglecting one of the most important aspects of American society, and therefore failing to understand the crucial context for their current political crisis standing. Now, to those who say they don't want to make a mistake when writing about race and racism, Let's respond with this: learn and study your history. Talk to the experts. Ask questions and educate yourself on this issue. Now treat those topics as you would any other matter of critical societal importance. If the answer is I choose not to write that story, I would say you made a choice to ignore a central element of the age of Trump and America's actual or potential descent into fascism and racial authoritarianism. Now, if the answer is more that the role of January 6th did not occur to me, the luxury not to see or understand racism and white supremacy is itself an example of white privilege and how it works out today. I do not question your good intentions, but those have little, if anything, to do with racist or white supremacist outcomes. If the answer is to respond that it's obvious that the Trump attack force was white and it serves no purpose to mention the said fact, I would explain how that is still a form of racial erasure, in which and basically which is doing the work of white supremacy. Assuming that these things are obvious, it basically helps to make invisible the myriad ways that whiteness and white power structure American society. Now, the power of racial colorblindness as a tool of white supremacy is easily understood. If the January 6 attackers had been black or brown or Muslim, there would have been no such racial erasure. They would have been described in racial terms by the media and in public discourse more generally, like almost every single time the event was mentioned. Now, my concern about the racial erasure and the events of January 6th are directed primarily toward the mainstream news media and its reasonable democratic or moderate voices. Now, the right-wing media is a propaganda machine that serves the interests of white supremacy, and it has no legitimacy or credibility in their discussion. But if the mainstream centrist and democratic voices in the media are to play any kind of effective role as defenders of democracy in this moment of crisis, they must remove their blinders of the whiteness. At its core, American neo-fascism is a white supremacist project. To blind yourself to that fact is to limit your ability to understand and to grasp the magnitude of the existential danger now facing American society. And that is the road to defeat and the literal end of America's experiment in multiracial democracy. Now, mainstream media can do better than this, and it absolutely must do better. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.